Listen, if you've ever felt that absolute crushing frustration of studying incredibly hard, putting in the long hours, sacrificing your weekends, but feeling like you are retaining absolutely nothing, I need you to know right now that I hear you. It is just a terrible, exhausting feeling to put in all that effort and feel like you have literally zero to show for it. Well, today we are breaking down some incredible source material for this explainer that is going to completely change how you view your own brain.
Seriously, think about it. Have you ever spent 6 straight hours staring at a textbook, only to realize maybe 10 minutes after closing it that you cannot remember a single thing you just read? I want you to be totally honest with me right now. Go ahead and comment yes down below if you've ever fallen into this exhausting 6-hour study trap. We've all been there, right? Just staring blankly at the wall, wondering why the information simply will not stick. Well, if that 6-hour scenario sounds way too familiar, let this truth sink in. The problem is not you. It is not your intelligence. You are not somehow bad at learning. The system you were taught is simply broken. If you're frustrated, it's just because you've been using the completely wrong manual for your brain. It's like you've been playing a really tough game with the wrong set of rules. But today, we are going to hand you the right manual.
To understand why your current methods are failing, we're going to run a really quick diagnostic check. The source material outlines 5 critical questions designed to expose exactly where your study habits are breaking down. I want you to answer these honestly in your own head as we go through them. Let's see what is actually happening when you sit down at your desk.
Okay, question number 1. Do you actually understand the material, or are you just recognizing words? It's kind of like nodding along while your friend solves a really complex math problem, but then just staring blankly when you have to do it yourself. This is a massive trap. You read a paragraph for the 4th time, and your brain says, "Oh yeah, I know this," but you don't really know it. You just recognize the shape of the sentences, and the second you close the book, that recognition completely vanishes.
Moving on to number 2, evaluate your goals. When you sit down to study, do you actually have a specific, measurable objective, or are you just putting in the hours? Because it is so easy to set a timer for 4 hours and tell yourself you're being super productive. But if your only metric for success is the amount of time your chair was occupied, you're setting yourself up for a total illusion of progress. Passive time just does not equal active learning.
Third, and wow, this one is a massive psychological trap. Do you actively avoid testing yourself because deep down you're kind of terrified of seeing how much you've already forgotten? We do this all the time. We treat testing as this scary final judgment of our worth, so we avoid it. We stick to comfortable, easy reading because flashcards or practice tests might expose the terrifying reality of our actual knowledge gaps.
Question 4. Are you trying to learn like a genius, or are you just blindly copying bad habits? Really think about it. Most of us just study the way our friends study or the way someone told us to back in middle school. We highlight, we reread, basically because everyone else does it, without ever stopping to ask if these methods actually align with how our brain biology physically stores data.
And finally, question 5. Is your brain actually full, or is it just totally overloaded? I want you to think of your working memory like a tiny funnel. You cannot shove an entire chapter through it all at once without it spilling over everywhere. When your brain feels like it physically cannot take in one more sentence, it's usually not a permanent capacity issue. You're just overwhelming the system by not feeding it information in a way it can actually process.
Now, look, if those 5 questions felt a little bit like a personal attack, take comfort in this. It is perfectly normal. It is incredibly exhausting to feel like a failure just because your brain is rejecting a bad method. Your struggle right now simply proves your brain is working exactly as biology intended. It's actively rejecting an inefficient, terrible learning method. Like we said, you're just using the wrong manual.
The ultimate roadmap to fixing all of this comes straight from our source material for this explainer, a book called How to Study Like a Genius by Shadow Books. This guide strips away all those old myths and gets right down to the biological mechanics of how smart study techniques actually lead to faster learning and much better memory.
The book exposes this absolutely crucial illusion, familiarity versus true memory. You see, rereading your notes creates this warm, easy feeling of familiarity. It feels smooth, it feels easy, but true memory requires effortful retrieval. You literally have to force your brain to reach into the dark and pull the information out without looking at the answer. If your studying feels too easy or comfortable, well, the harsh reality is that your brain probably isn't learning much at all.
It also completely shatters the time spent trap. Learning is measured strictly by what you can actively recall, not the hours your chair was occupied.
You can sit down for one highly focused hour of effortful retrieval and retain significantly more than someone pulling a passive 6-hour reading marathon. Let me say that again. Passive time does not build memory. Chair time is not learning time.
You know what's really fascinating here? It's how this method reframes our fear of failure. Remember that diagnostic question about being terrified of testing? We usually view gaps in our knowledge as personal failures. But biologically, the very struggle of trying to remember is exactly what builds the neural connection. Testing isn't a final judgment of your intelligence. It's actually the active mechanical tool that builds the memory in the first place.
And that brings us to a massively empowering realization. Genius is not some magical genetic gift that you are either born with or you aren't. It is a biological method. Top performers, whether in academics or in their careers, aren't necessarily gifted with superior brains. They are just utilizing systems that align with how human biology actually works. They are working with the machine, not against it.
So how do we actually work with the machine? Let's go back and address that tiny funnel of your working memory. The solution is chunking. Instead of staring down a massive 40-page chapter, you break it down into, say, 3 core concepts. You master one concept, file it away, and then move to the next. By chunking the information, you respect your biological limits and allow your brain to actually process and file the data away without completely collapsing under the sheer weight of information overload.
Doing this leads to a really deep psychological shift, moving from emotional studying to strategic studying. When we're panicked the night before an exam, stress hormones just flood the brain, literally blocking your ability to retrieve memories. We push ourselves harder out of fear, which somehow only makes the block even worse. Strategic studying means working with your brain's limits to keep that stress low, knowing for a fact that high anxiety shuts down retention entirely.
What we really need is a repeatable framework. Because remember, you aren't lazy, you just lack a system. This framework isn't about waiting around for motivation or relying on some sudden burst of inspiration. It is a structural safety net that works even when you are totally exhausted and running on fumes. It's a biological blueprint for getting information out of a textbook and permanently into your head.
So here is your new manual. First, active recall. Closing the book and forcing your brain to retrieve facts from scratch rather than just rereading them. Second, spacing reviews. Revisiting topics over a span of days, not hours, to interrupt the forgetting curve. Third, chunking. Digesting information in bite-sized pieces so you don't overflow that funnel. And finally, protecting sleep. Because sleep is the actual biological window where those newly formed neural connections physically cement themselves in your brain.
I want to leave you with one final provocative test. If you had to teach the main point of this explainer to a 5-year-old right now, could you do it? Drop a yes in the comments if you could, or a no if you'd struggle. Because the ultimate test of the Genius Method is this. If you cannot explain it simply, you haven't truly learned it yet. So ditch the 6-hour marathons, grab this new manual, and start learning strategically. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning out there.